This episode of Q Point Podcast is pre-recorded, produced and sponsored by Karina Quirk, broker at Next Home Experience.
Different views.
I know your story.
From different cues.
Incredible job.
He's David Quirk.
You brought it up.
And she's Karina Quirk.
Imagine.
This is
Q Point.
Now joining us in studio is Maine State Senator Joe Baldacci.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here.
Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming back,
Thank
Joe.
you, David.
As always, we appreciate it. You are our state senator for our district.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
But that's not the only reason we invited him.
No, he's a good guy. And obviously, your family and our family's been together for years, and you and I are good friends.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you for
very
coming
much.
in.
Absolutely.
And he brought along a friend of his, former Maine Senate President and gubernatorial candidate, Troy Jackson. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me here today. This is awesome.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming in.
Joe, I've seen on Facebook that you endorsed Troy.
Yes, I've worked with him for the last 4 or 5 years in the Senate and got to know him a lot better personally, but also we've faced a lot of important issues over that time period. Mental health, healthcare, education, childcare, a number of these issues in terms of initiatives that were important for our hospitals and our nursing homes. Troy was a huge part of making sure that happened. Despite all the surrounding noise, he kept his eye on the ball. And I think as governor, he's going to do the same. He has a heart for people, but he also has a head for how to get things done and how to make things better for people. So I think he'll be very good. I think we have a lot of great candidates running, but he's my first choice.
Troy, you're for the working class, pro-union. What is going to differentiate yourself from other Democratic candidates in the 2026 gubernatorial race?
Well, thanks again for having me here. I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that Maine can do, in my opinion, so much better. We got a great state, got great people, but I think we're kind of spinning our wheels a lot of times. I am very much someone that's working class. I believe in unions, but I also believe very strongly in business across the state. I'm a fifth-generation logger. The logging community is mostly sole proprietors. I mean, I've run small businesses myself, and I know how hard that is to get up early in the morning and go to work, spend your whole day out there trying to make it work. And I feel like Augusta oftentimes doesn't get how hard that is for a business to actually operate in the state. And we got to be more business friendly as far as understanding that sense of how a state can be more friendly to reach out and work with a business, become more efficient. How Fridays, a lot of times, you only get a couple hours at the end of the day to make those calls. And oftentimes when you make that call, there's nobody there. And that's the time whenever a lot of working class people have to make that happen. And you make that call and there's nobody on the other end. And I just feel like we can do a lot more in this state to be more incentivized to make that work. And that's going to make everybody be able to have better opportunity in this state. Like Joe said, we're in crisis in this state with nursing homes. We've lost 40% of our nursing homes in a state that we need elder care more than ever now. Business owners need workers. We need childcare. Joe fought this past session like crazy to keep the program that we created, Republicans and Democrats. I mean, that was one of our signature accomplishments 2 years ago, to create a childcare program to help subsidize that with childcare providers, people that needed that service, so we could get more workers out into the community. And just as soon as, unfortunately, I termed out, there was an attempt to cut it back. And thankfully, Joe and others fought and kept it going. We can do more things in the state to bring workers and businesses together. I know it. I mean, I feel very strongly about it. But that sense of urgency, I think, is really what distinguishes me from my competitors. That's not to put them down or anything, but I know what it's like. I get up in the morning and see the people. I understand. I felt it my entire life, and I just feel like Maine has a lot more opportunity, and it's breaking my heart that a lot of people feel like government has left them behind, workers and businesses.
Speaking of businesses, you're up in Aroostook County, and I'm sure you hear macrum, right, with the energy bill. And Joe and I have talked about this a few times about our charges for either hybrids or EV vehicles, where the power is just unbelievable expensive. Do you have any plans, or how are you going to be able to help new businesses coming into the state with such a high electricity bill or property tax? And I believe that the income tax bill that Joe voted against at 8.95% is being carried over until January. How are you going to be different to bring businesses into the state of Maine?
Well, you bring up McCrum. That was actually one of the bills that I sponsored, and Joe actually helped me. That's exactly one of the things the Democrats did to actually bring McCrum to the table. What we wanted to do was help incentivize him to have a new process in Aroostook County. But one of the ways that we did it was we made sure that he was creating good jobs. But in addition to that, he was using Maine potatoes, so that actually helped the farmers in Aroostook County. For the first time since the 1960s, we're actually growing more potatoes in Aroostook County than we were because of that bill. And that's the type of incentivizing, that's the type of good, smart planning that I think we can do to incentivize businesses here in the Maine. Now, what you're talking about with the high energy prices, I agree. I mean, that became a real problem for Jay and Jason. What we have to do is find ways to not have that happen. And I think what we could have done was, instead of the incentive program that I came up with there, is that we could have had income tax incentives that would have allowed some of these people to come in and use that program to get solar subsidies instead of putting it on ratepayers like they did. Now, Joe could talk this. I think they've changed that whole program now. I could be wrong. But the way that worked out actually did hurt high energy users, and that was wicked unfortunate, and I'd like to figure out a way to change that. I think we can do that in the future.
The current legislation is to phase out those subsidies. By the end of the year, there won't be any new ones allowed, and it's supposed to reduce the projection by $85 million reduction. We'll have to see how that goes. I just want to say a couple of things. Aroostook County, anything Aroostook County needed, Troy Jackson was on there. Didn't matter who they were. If they came from the county, they were going to get help, seriously. And the other thing in terms of businesses, I just want to add my 2 cents, that I also think that the next governor really needs to take education at all levels. I think if we can continue to upgrade the quality of the skills of Maine workers and attract more people with those skills here, that we'll be doing a major service for business. What businesses need, in addition to economic incentives, I think, is making sure we have a quality, trained workforce. While some work has been done, certainly in terms of the community college system, we really need to make a concerted effort to focus on the technical skills that are most in need and to upgrade people's skills in general and try to attract more people in those areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The question is, how do we keep those young people here, not somewhere else?
That's a great question, but I would note that what I've seen is that Maine has grown. The people coming here for different reasons. They're probably more seniors than other entities, but yes, we need to make more opportunities for kids. I think that's been a challenge for several generations in terms of this state, but I do think that if we can increase the quality of the technical skills, that will help improve business in general, being able to meet labor force shortage, but also to be able to serve customers better and to provide a better product. So I think those type of things kind of work together. But you're right. We have a kind of a brain drain going on. I have one daughter who lives out of state and one daughter is going to be moving to Southern Maine. So, I'm going to do everything I can to make Bangor or this part of the state as attractive as possible.
Well, besides having quality jobs, we got to do more about affordable housing here. I mean, people can't find jobs in Maine if they don't have a place to stay. And that has been a real challenge and something, again, with trying to help the state get out of the way of some of the developers. I mean, as I go across the state, I've talked to numerous developers, Bangor, Waterville, Portland. I was just in Westbrook over the weekend. They're having a hard time to get people, state government, just help them get going. And it's slowing them down. It's costing them money, interest rates and things like that. A lot of money that has been wasted while they're waiting. And we have such a short season to build. These are things that state government could speed up and make it so much more opportunity. And I think this is something that we have to get very creative. Property tax reform, this is blowing up across the state. Valuations since COVID. It's making it very hard for young families to live in Maine, much less work here. So, I mean, the next governor has to tackle this, and that's something I feel very strongly about.
Yeah, I think if there was one disappointment I had about the last legislative session was the property tax issue. I think that we need to address it. I wanted to do something in terms of seniors. There were a number of different proposals. I have one bill that did pass, but it's being held over till next year, which would double the homestead exemption. But the property tax issue is something that Augusta, if we don't handle it in 2026, I think that'll be a major regret It's such a key issue to so many people and so many communities.
Right now, obviously, Joe, the parties, it seems like, are just not getting along. The Republicans, the Democrats, it seems like whenever there's a vote, it's always all Democrats or all Republicans.
I beg to disagree a little bit. I know,
Except for Joe.
I would say there's a handful.
You and Rick Bennett.
I don't know. Senator Timberlake said he would trade me for Senator Bennett. I don't know. So I would just say, yes, often there are party line votes, but there is a lot that gets done on a bipartisan basis, particularly in the committee levels. So we aren't quite at the DC level of toxicity, but we certainly don't want to get worse. But there is a fair amount of bipartisanship on a number of maybe smaller issues, but they're still important to people at different levels. In terms of the budget, I think that's going to be a continuing issue because of the concern by Democrats for a possible government shutdown. The concern by the Democrats is if we don't pass a majority budget, then we could be here forever trying to negotiate a 2/3 budget. So that's where we are now.
You've been listening to Q Point Podcast. I'm Karina Quirk, co-hosting with my husband, David Quirk, and we are having a conversation with Maine State Senator Joe Baldacci and former Maine Senate President and Democratic gubernatorial candidate Troy Jackson.
So, Troy, how are you going to be able to handle it if you do become governor to get both sides working together? What can you do differently that's not really being done now?
Well, I mean, I think being decent to people is job number one. I mean, when I became Senate President, looking around, the first thing I did was I mixed up the seating, trying to get more people talking to each other. When you're separated by the aisle right out of the gate, you don't have those conversations. You don't get a chance to find out where people are coming from. And I think that's a big part of just talking to people. But I chaired apportionment 2 separate times. Here in Maine, we don't have the gerrymandering. You got to get 2/3 vote, which both times I chaired it. We did get 2/3 vote. You sit in front of somebody, you talk about the ins and outs of it. And when you have that type of discussion like that and try and be honest and keep that integrity, people will usually respond to that. And eventually you got to make a deal. And I'm happy to do that. There's certain things that people want. And if you can both come and feel like you gave and take, then you can do that. But I've always been willing to work with people. I mean, sometimes I can't give up on something that's a core belief to me, but I always feel like I want to work with people. And as I go across the state, I don't see people as Republican or Democrat. People are asking for economic security. Democrats and Republicans, they want to have a good job. They want to have health care and prescription drugs. Right now, like I said, property taxes have gone out of whack for too many people. Childcare, like I said, nursing home, affordable housing. I mean, these are things that I feel strongly about. And the people in my community, Aroostook County, used to be solidly Democrat. They're solidly Republican. I was still getting elected there because they knew I was fighting for the things they cared about. And that's the way I'm going to approach this. It's the things that I know matter to people when they go to bed at night and they get up in the morning. That's what they care about with their kids. I wish we didn't care about this Democrat and Republican because it gets in the way of too many things. But when somebody needs to go to the doctor, and that's another thing, our hospitals are in crisis, and this has been coming. We've been sweeping it under the rug. Joe knows that. Not that we haven't been trying, but we really need to sit down and have a real discussion about this, not just what a committee can do once or twice in a week. We've got to take a long-term approach and figure out how we're going to fix these things because we need health care in the state, and we certainly need it across rural Maine because it's getting really bad. And this is something that sense of urgency is really starting to worry me, and it's a big part of why I'm running for governor.
And I just want to say that bipartisanship is a serious issue for me. I grew up in this area, and when I served on the city council or was working at the restaurant or working as an attorney, we have to deal with all kinds of people. Doesn't matter whether Republican, Democrat, or Independent. You're supposed to serve them. You're supposed to do the best job. I live in this community. Others live in this community. We want the best for our area. So on a number of issues, I took an independent stance. On some important issues, like the energy choice bill, I was the only Democratic co-sponsor of that bill. And that's a bill that Senator Jackson has actually co-sponsored when he was there. But that was to protect not just our local energy dealers, but also to prevent huge disruptions in the market. And that took Democratic votes to pass and got Democratic votes, and the governor signed it. And I think I was on a program with Senator Harrington, and I think he understands that took serious bipartisan effort because they weren't sure that bill was going to pass. The other one I worked on extensively with the chamber was on the packaging bill. There were major concerns about the packaging bill. There were amendments that were approved by the Environment Committee that ended up getting passed. And prior years, with Senator Jackson's help, we worked on some amendments to the PFAS bill because of the regulations that were going into effect. So there are a number of bills like that have been done on a bipartisan basis. The big spending bills have not, and I'm not sure what the answer is to that, because in order to get an answer to things like hospitals and nursing homes, we are going to have Republican support, but we're going to have to see how that goes. It can't be your way or the highway. I've always recognized that, and I know Senator Jackson has. When Senator Jackson was in charge of the Senate, the relationship with the Republican leadership in terms of knowing what's going on or being part of the discussion was always there. So I think that there was a sense of mutual respect. But I think that we need to try to figure out what we need to do on the budget and the bigger issues. But that's going to take a lot of work. The hospitals is a continuing conversation. We've increased the reimbursement rates significantly, and we passed some other legislation this year on a bipartisan basis to provide more money from the pharmaceutical industry to the hospitals. So we'll have to see where that is in terms of whether or not that's going to be fought in court by the pharmaceuticals, but it would be about a $70 to $80 million a year increase just by itself for hospitals, which would be significant. And the nursing homes, I'm not sure, to be honest, and I'm not asking Troy to comment on this, but I'm not sure the current administration has taken that issue seriously enough. I think that the sensitivity to local rural communities and healthcare, I'm not sure they've looked at it, how it affects people on the ground versus how it affects whatever numbers they're running in Augusta. So I know for a fact, having worked with Troy, having helped pass a bill with him the first year I was there, but also working with him, that nursing homes is going to be a top priority, and it should be for rural Maine. Rural Maine has different issues than southern Maine. Having lived here, and that it needs to be a distinction that the people at the highest levels need to understand.
Absolutely. Troy, David touched upon this. This proposed income tax increase up to 8.95. Would you support that, or what would you do if you were governor?
Like I said, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to the specifics of it, but I'll tell you right now that I'm not taking a no income tax pledge like Governor Mills did, because I'm not going to be put in that box. And what happened in D.C. with Trump's legislation, I don't know how that's going to affect us. And if Maine Care, Medicaid, nursing homes all get negatively affected, we're going to have to make that up somehow. And so universal school meals, something that I'm very proud of. I think made a huge difference across the state. If things like that gets cut, we got $1 billion in the rainy day fund, probably about $600 million in other special revenue accounts. That won't go that awful far depending on federal funding losses. So again, I'm not sitting here saying I'm going to raise taxes, but I would have to see what comes from the federal government before I would make a decision on that. And again, I don't know what that bill does. I wasn't in the legislature last session, and I spent like 2 days there in the entire time that the legislature operated. So
that is 8.95, but you got to add in the 0.5% for the Family Leave Act, which makes it 9.4. And if you're an employer, you got the other 0.5%. So really at 10%.
I don't anticipate she's going to sign it.
And the budget is, quite high as it is. To raise that to 11 or 12%, I mean, now you're talking California kind of taxes, and we certainly don't have California wages here.
Very true.
Yeah.
When you say 10%,
for a business.
For an employer, right.
Just to clarify, the bill itself, which I voted against.
Yes, you did. And I did, thank you.
Yeah. And I also voted against one regarding the corporate income tax. But the bill itself would raise taxes only for those making more than $400,000, because there was actually a small tax cut for people making less than $400,000. So the impact on employers would be mixed, but I get your point.
Right,
in terms of their individual income tax.
Unless, keep in mind, the S corporations that are flow-through entities, that income goes through the personal taxes, and it looks like someone may be earning $400,000 or more, but that is business income that they may not be realizing, and it goes back into their business for inventory, capital projects, and so forth.
I agree, and I think that the governor is probably going to veto it. She had already opposed it in the committee, but I'll be shocked that she signs it. But I think that, as Senator Jackson said, there's a lot of reservation because the federal bill is going to have significant financial impact on Maine, and I'm not sure we have sorted that out. So it's hard to make hard and fast commitments. And I have a feeling the governor's probably going to call us back into session in October to discuss those impacts. My feeling has been that the rainy day fund is there for a reason. And I understand it won't fill in permanently, but I think part of it needs to be used as a bridge to get us from one hard time to hopefully some better times in terms of the economics without having to burden people. That is money that was extra, that was put in there by statute. There's a reason that it's there, and it should be available to meet human needs that may go by the wayside in the federal legislation and that we may need to address.
And just to be clear, I have never voted to raise income taxes in my entire time there. But, you asked.
Obviously, I understand because nobody knows the future. And you're right. If the federal government cuts out funds, obviously there could be some gaps that need to be filled. One other thing we're talking about is transportation. The Transportation Committee, as far as our infrastructure, I'm sure you heard it on the news. I think we got an F for infrastructure. So obviously,
so let me
clarify that, Joe.
Yeah, well, no, I don't want to clarify. You're absolutely right. But I just wanted to talk. That's one of the areas that I have a beef with because the highway fund should be self-supporting. The highway fund is currently taking $250 million to $300 million out of the state budget. So when we talk about tight state budget and raising tobacco tax, we're subsidizing the highway fund because we haven't done anything with tolls or any other fee issues with the highway fund. It should be bipartisan.
It should be.
But the highway fund needs to be self-sustaining. That's the way it's supposed to be. If we're going to continue to subsidize it with the general fund, then we're never going to see an income tax cut. I can tell you that right now because the money to the transportation to subsidize just the highway thing is going to continue to grow. That is an issue that I think that we need to pay attention to and figure out a way. And we may have to go back to a variety of different mechanisms, but the highway fund being self-sufficient would help the normal budget. And then we'd have room to talk about different options. But right now, when you're taking $300 million out just for the highway fund, and that was done on a bipartisan basis. In fact, the Republicans were very much for it and taking part of the sales tax for the autos and the rest of it. But we need to have a highway fund. I always believed that the reason is to be self-sufficient. That's the whole purpose. Otherwise, if we're going to be subsidizing that, then we're not going to be able to talk about tax cuts.
Right.
What are you proposing?
We're going to have to look at tolls. We're going to have to look at electric vehicles. I have to look at what other states are doing. Other states have computerized systems. Like in Boston, I don't see anybody, but they know when I cross the Tobin Bridge, I get a bill. So we're going to have to look at what other states are doing to make sure that people on the roads, which includes probably 20% out-of-state drivers, are paying their fair share of that. But for us to continue to take it out of the general fund, which has only been happening in the last 4 or 5 years, is going to distort any other budget priorities that we have. Education, healthcare, taxes, property taxes. I'm not going to say it's going to solve problems, but not having to subsidize each year is certainly going to help one part of it. And I understand that's going to be difference on fees and the rest of it, but we have to have a self-sufficient highway fund.
So that leads us into passenger rail.
Yeah, how's that coming?
How's that coming? Well, last time I talked to the governor, she said I'm a young man and I keep fighting for it, but I'm getting older every day. So I think that it's going to be very difficult. As you saw this past session, the Department of Transportation, why I have no love lost for the commissioner who's leaving, is that all they want to do, and I understand, is to build roads. There's no concept about other mechanisms in terms of any kind of public transit. The fact is that we're subsidizing the Amtrak from Portland to Boston. We're subsidizing at least 50% of its operation. So I understand that. But I'm paying those tax dollars like you are. It's not like we have service here. And I think it's an issue also about economic growth, about rural communities having access to transportation. It's a very complicated issue, but I think all we had been asking for is that we make an initiative with the federal government because there are infrastructure monies to at least try to pursue how far we could go. But to be honest, I think it's going to take leadership either by a governor or by a U.S. senator or somebody in Congress. The only way we got Amtrak the first time is because Olympia Snowe was on the Senate Transportation Committee and John Baldacci was on the House Transportation Committee together in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we got it to Portland after 20 years of discussion about it. but it was never intended to be just in Portland. So it's going to be a long, hard fight.
So, Troy, what are your thoughts on passenger rail?
Yeah, I think we're losing opportunity. You get a lot of people across the state that talk about the environmental benefits of EVs, but never once talk about trains. We can't mandate, nor should we mandate everyone in the state to have electric vehicles. I'm okay with subsidy for people to buy them, but why wouldn't we want to try and see where you could have a train coming into Portland or Bangor, where people could go into Portland, Bangor, get off the train. The parking in Portland is really challenging. Go to work, have some other opportunity bus or whatever, get around there and then get back on the train, go home. That seems to me to make a lot of sense. That cures a lot of the environmental problems that people are complaining about. I don't think we can do that all across the state, obviously. I don't think you're going to see a train up in my home of Allagash anytime soon. But in the more urban parts of Maine, I think we should be looking at that and seeing what we could do to help. And like I said, in a place like Portland, I think that would make a lot of sense, getting a lot of the traffic off, easing up on a lot of the parking. And again, for the people that are so concerned about the environment, which, I certainly am, this is a way to help cure some of that.
You've been listening to Part 1 with Senator Joe Baldacci and former Maine Senate President and gubernatorial candidate Troy Jackson. Make sure to tune in to Part 2 tomorrow, Sunday, August 10th at 6:30 a.m. on VOM, the Voice of Maine. You don't want to miss it.
You've been listening to Q Point.
Follow us at qpointpodcast.com or on your favorite streaming app.
This is where you can get the news from the people who make the news.
Make sure to join us next time.
We hope you tune in.
Q Point Podcast invites candidates from all parties to join the conversation. The views, information, opinions, and comments expressed during this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, Q Point Podcast, associates, affiliates, and CQRE LLC.
Thanks for being a part of the conversation. Catch every episode at qpointpodcast.com or wherever you stream. Tune in and tell your friends.